Hi, my name is Piotr and I would like to welcome you to my presentation on dark patterns by example. In this presentation you're going to learn some stuff about dark patterns. I'm going to show you two examples of dark patterns, where one of them will be focused on the hidden details in URLs and the second one would be focused on consent without consent. Then I'm going to show you what or how dark patterns are regulated in our European and Polish law. And then I'm going to tell you what actions you can take against dark patterns. And I will show you two different perspectives, like first as an individual and second one as a business. So, before we start, let me share some information about me. My name is Piotr, I'm based in Gdańsk, and I run a business called AppSecure, and I support various companies with privacy and security engineering services. I have been in the industry of software engineering, cybersecurity, and legal also for many years. I have more than 12 years of actual experience. And I held various roles such as software engineering roles, data protection officer, and also security roles in my work experience. So this way I can provide you some guidance and support on both technical and legal aspects of software and compliance. In this example, I'm going to show you some hidden details in YouTube sharing functionality, where additional parameters are added to the URLs, and no one really pays attention to that. And I'm going to explain to you why is it important to check URL parameters from privacy and compliance perspective, so you may learn that this specific issue doesn't only apply to YouTube, but it also applies to many other services as well. In this demo, you're going to see a user which is called URL promoter, who's going to share his favorite link with some other person. So this user is actually clicking on a share functionality in YouTube to create a sharing link. This functionality works both in mobile and the web versions of YouTube. What happens next? The user would just copy the link and send the URL to the URL recipient. And as a next step, user would receive and open a link so that person may see a favorite video of the URL promoter. So let's take a look at what would happen when a user would click on a link and also a user would click on a share button. So the URL promoter who clicked on a share feature in YouTube basically would share in the background a lot of metadata with YouTube. So each activity like this will send a request to the backend, to the server, where a lot of analytics data, a lot of browser information will be provided to YouTube. Well, however, making every request in YouTube sends a lot of analytics data. However, this is another step where additional set of data is going to be sent. As a next step, an additional URL parameter is added to the sharing link. Normally, sharing links were consisting of domains and a sharing video ID. However, right now in this example, you may notice that not only the video ID is added to the URL, but also an additional parameter called SI is added to the link, and this parameter contains some specific value. As a next step, when a user and URL recipient clicks on the link, that user would be redirected to one URL. So it won't really matter if that person would click on a link containing SI parameter or the link would be without SI parameter. So that's an important detail from privacy and compliance perspective that a user should pay attention to. what are the implications of just a little short parameter being added to such URL? In this situation, URL promoter may not become fully anonymous. So for example, if that person would want to stay anonymous, however, that person wouldn't hide himself on various forums but would use his real name, nickname, then it's more likely that this person could be de-anonymized if this specific URL with the parameter would be searched under the condition that the URL would be indexed by the search engines. That means that a person who wants to share his favorite video and stay anonymous should probably remove the SI parameter and not link the YouTube URL with his private account. It turns out that this parameter is not really necessary, it's going to be used for various forms of analytics. And that's the main risk that falls on the URL promoter. Then URL recipient would also potentially share a bit more data with YouTube due to the fact that the SI parameter is added and that specific request done by the recipient could be captured and also linked to the SI parameter in the YouTube analytics. So technically, more metadata could be collected about both promoter and the recipient. So in this situation, what I would recommend is to pay attention to the URLs and remove, for example, unnecessary parameters. However, what I wanted to say in addition to that it's not the only type of little dark pattern that could happen in the URLs, but you should be aware of that there are much more such parameters in the space of the internet. So you may notice that there are parameters that are linked to analytics, to advertisements, also other forms of identifiers, which could be used also again for analytics, ads, or any forms of de-anonymization. On the screen, you're going to see some examples of the commonly used parameters, which are auto-applied quite frequently by various social media platforms. And what is the way to stay safer and more private? On the personal side, you may use various browser extensions or different browsers which do automatically remove unnecessary parameters. For example, Firefox has a setting which is privacy query stripping, which removes some specific query URLs, query params from the URL, but it has many limitations. It doesn't remove too many of them, which makes it pretty much not as useful as it could be. On the other side, you can also use various add-ons which would remove the URL params which are excessive. However, in some rare situations, they could break your URL, so you need to be able to debug and roll back the URL so you can use a correct URL. So on what you can also do on personal side is to pay attention to details and keep learning. This is important, the awareness that you create and that you build for yourself and your friends is going to help more with staying more private in the space of volume of analytics and ads that are going to be used on a daily basis. As a business, you have, well, a bit more choices because it's your decision to protect your users' privacy and make sure they can freely and safely use your products without being de-anonymized. So technically, you can introduce various policies regarding ethical design, and also you can improve your internal processes such as software development lifecycle and QA processes to protect your end users against various dark patterns. In the second example, I will show you how various companies are getting users' consent without their intended consent. This is an example which is really common on the internet, and it's a real threat to privacy. In the example that I've selected, you're going to see a single dark pattern that actually consists of multiple dark patterns. So I call this annoy the users to get their consent. And what you can see in this image is a large volume of text that also contains the information about how important your privacy is. And by default, what would happen if you would click on the primary button on the bottom, which is actually accepting all the cookies and all the purposes of the processing, you would be sharing your personal data with over 800 partners in this situation. So technically, the owner, the data controller, doesn't really care about your privacy, as you may notice. So to protect your privacy, you would have to click the advanced settings to actually change your privacy settings to the desired ones. However, you may notice that quite a lot of them are turned off, which is correct, but some of them are not. So the data controller here is using the basis of legitimate interest to force you into accepting additional cookies. So these practices will try to annoy the user as much as it's possible to actually force them to accept the processing purposes and sharing with various numbers of vendors. Even if you try to modify your settings, you're going to share by default also some additional data about yourself, but on a different legal basis, which is an actual problem, and those are examples of typical dark patterns. So you must be really knowledgeable and proactive to really manage this situation. And the users may also be asked again each time they visit the website to, change their privacy settings. So they are going to be annoyed even more to follow the happy path designed by the data controller. So, for example, how consent is obtained through the use of dark patterns? Well, the data controllers would usually give you no options to reject all cookies with a single button. A browser privacy settings will not be respected by default, so this means that your do not track me setting won't do anything at all. Then a lot of pre-selected checkboxes that will give your consent are going to be set, so you have to deselect them all one by one, and quite frequently you won't be able to deselect them like all of them, but the controller will give you an opportunity for your patience testing. So they will ask you to turn off manually hundreds of checkboxes before you can enter a website. Then, if you try to reject all the cookies, you will be redirected out of the website, which is going to again frustrate you as a user because you will have to go back and change the settings into those which will work eventually. Then also the controllers are going to use some deceptive color coding practices, so it will be harder for you to click on the rejections for the privacy enhancing features. And also what you may notice is that quite frequently the data controllers are going to use legitimate interest as a GDPR legal basis to force you into accepting some additional cookies without your intended consent. And you may also be annoyed on a regular basis to give your consent anyway. So all of these activities are going to force you into providing your consent. And those are the series of examples of dark patterns that will be tested on you, and your patience will be challenged to its maximum limit. What is the word data on cookie banners? I found one article which is called "Do Cookie Banners Respect My Choice?" And in this article, the authors measure that over 54% of cookie banners have compliance issues. This was done for the spectrum of 560 websites. However, those were quite popular, most common, and probably most compliant websites on the internet, meaning that some more websites probably could have worse performance when it comes to compliance. So you may notice that there is a lot of data that is going to be captured by the use of dark patterns, and it's only up to you to protect yourself against the dark patterns. In this section, I'm going to tell you what actions could you take on the business side to avoid dark patterns. I'm going to focus on people, process, and policy level. So on the people side in your organization, you may probably think about the easiest approach, and I believe that you're completely right that you need to focus on education. You need to focus on educating your team on various forms of ethical design and ethical approach to software engineering. Then, also what really glues well together with ethics is also data protection and privacy protection. It's a link between those ethics and privacy that actually makes products user-friendly, safe, private-friendly, so they are highly positive from the business and individual perspective. Also, in addition to that, you should also empower your team. So you can do that in multiple ways. Either you could consider starting off an ethical champion program, and also you could consider appointing an ethics officer. So that role could be potentially similar in some ways to data protection officer, which is appointed at various organizations. So on this level, it's going to improve your agility when it comes to the approach to the dark patterns reduction or removal. On the process side, you should basically think about various ways to control the process around managing dark patterns. So for example, you should think about performing regular audits on the interfaces to make sure that they follow your internal and commonly available ethical standards. Also, you should focus on your QA team so they know really well that and they understand really well dark patterns and they are able to detect them in a simple way during the whole QA process. From the support perspective, also you should consider implementing a whistleblower program which will allow employees to submit when they notice various forms of dark patterns, so your ethical officer could manage those within your organization. Also, you should recognize and reward your employees so you can create a culture with positive reinforcement, so they can be fully assured that they won't be punished for, following ethical solutions. In the last section of this part is the policies. This is the base level for your organization. So with establishing the clear policy, clear direction, how do you want to approach and solve specific problems on the dark patterns, you're going to give clarity to your employees how they should behave when it comes to encountering dark patterns within your organization. So various forms of guidelines, code of conducts would effectively help your team understand when it comes to ethical, data protection centric or privacy centric approach to obtaining user consent and giving the right number of space, right volume of space for your employees to make decisions, and notify of various dark patterns. Also, what you should consider is to repeat what has been established. So you should basically review and update various policies. You should also perform some activities to make sure that those policies are actually followed. And that basically creates a full culture and awareness of the approach to solving dark patterns in your organization. What actions could you take on the personal level to defend yourself from dark patterns? Well, technically, there are two main areas, where the first one is learning and decision making, and the second one is tooling. So basically, in the first phase, as for the businesses, you need to focus on learning continuously. So you should use your time, read various magazines, read online blogs, where you can learn more about dark patterns. So you need to stay more or less up to date with dark patterns. Also, what is important in the learning process is sharing. So you should share what you notice about the dark patterns with others. So there's a way that you can teach others, your friends, your family, your colleagues at work, about dark patterns that, well, appear quite frequently on various websites. And also, when you're in doubt, you should not be afraid to ask about specific dark patterns and how this could be interpreted. And on the other side, aside from learning, you should also think what actions you could take to keep yourself safe. And usually it's critical thinking. So whenever an offer is really good, think twice and think critically about what could go wrong or what you're getting into with some specific website or vendor. Then you should always think about how you can avoid taking decisions too quickly, because you could fall into some specific traps around quick decisions when you're rushed and you don't use critical thinking and you fall into a trap. Also, like from the basic stuff, you should take a look at the terms and conditions of some new websites that you're using and check the company registration details so you can validate if it's an actual company or just a scam to put you into a trap. On the tooling side, you can use software tools. So, for example, you could use browser plugins, which would block, for example, excessive URL parameters in the URLs. You could use these more organized browsers, which do have some built-in protections by default. However, you need to remember that these plugins and browsers won't fix all your privacy and security issues around dark patterns. They will help only with some of them. Also, you should make sure that you update your software, because by default sometimes those dark patterns could use or misuse specific functionalities in the older versions of the browsers, which would be used against you. On the legal tooling, you could have multiple ways which you could take. Firstly, you could notify a data protection officer of that company that they are using dark patterns. It could sometimes help, because not always the companies are aware what is going on their websites. Also, you could consider filing a complaint to a data protection authority. Also, you could consider filing other complaint to an authority which is responsible for the competitiveness inside your country. So, for example, quite recently in Poland, Amazon.com was fined for using dark patterns on their website. So these tools work. They may be slow, but they do work, and you should remember about using them. Let's summarize what you have just seen. So dark patterns are practices that try to distort or impair your decision-making or choice-making capabilities. So technically, dark patterns could be barely visible in some situations and, for example, could impact your privacy, or also they could be quite annoying when it comes to the decision-making aspect. So they will try to force you to give your consent, which is not an actual realistic consent. And there are various forms of dark patterns, from the subtle and minimal dark patterns that will link to some privacy aspects of your life, throughout decision making in various websites, up to various decision making around your finances. However, what you've also learned that there are specific actions that could be taken on the business side and also on the personal level. So there is a possibility to establish various forms of protections from the dark patterns. However, the most important bit is the awareness of the dark patterns that you can really use and spread throughout your friends, family, colleagues, and at your workspace, so others can benefit from that. And this may affect others, so also your workspace and various organizations may establish various policies around the ethical design of software. This could help solve many issues around dark patterns, and this could create the internet which is more safe, more secure, more privacy friendly to everyone who's using it, no matter if you're an expert in software engineering or just an ordinary person trying to purchase something on the web. So I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I would like to invite you to my channel, which is called Digital by Design, where I will start posting this year more videos on dark patterns, privacy, and cybersecurity. Thank you, and I wish you a great day.